Having read the book, my view is that the doctrine of basic structure of the Constitution has a very debatable jurisprudential basis. I would not say anything more than this. What the bill provides is diluted form of federalism, because it's a union territory, not a full-fledged state.
On 24th April 1973, 13 judges of the Supreme Court sat down to deliver a historic verdict. That case is known as the Kesav Nanda Bharti case or the fundamental rights case. The entire constitution, our constitutional history, the judgments handed down in this country can be understood as pre-Kesav Nanda Bharti or post-Kesav Nanda Bharti. It's the holy grail of understanding the Indian jurisprudence and Indian constitution. Recently, while speaking on the floor of the House, former Chief Justice of India and the member of Rajya Sabha, Mr. Ranjan Gogoi, made an argument and questioned the basis of Kesav Nanda Bharti. What exactly is this case that has aroused so much political and judicial interest? Why is it that this case continues to be debated today, relevant today, and what is the importance of Kesav Nanda Bharti? We tell you about this. First, the comments of former Chief Justice of India, Ranjan Gogoi. It's not the first time that the sanctity of Kesav Nanda Bharti or the judicial reasoning behind it has been questioned. Even earlier, we had Mr. Dhankar, Jagdeep Dhankar, the Vice President of India, who had made certain comments and questioned the basis of this entire theory, of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. To understand the context, background, history of Kesav Nanda Bharti, one needs to go back to the history of this case and what led to the handing down of that crucial judgment. Now, the build-up is a series of confrontation between then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who was in power, and the Supreme Court of India. It was a very strong government, which was a strong majority on the floor of the House. There were a series of reforms that were brought in by Indira Gandhi, and at that time, there was a debate ensuing that what are the powers of the parliament? To what extent can the parliament make changes or amendment to the Indian constitution? The fundamental rights, equality, liberty, article pertaining to freedom of expression or the right to property, are they really fundamental in nature? And if they are fundamental, what kind of changes can the parliamentarians really bring to these fundamental rights? There were a series of judgments that were handed down by the Supreme Court. Golaknath, the Privy Purses case, and various other cases. All of these cases set a background and a genesis which, in a way, in a sense, limited the power of the parliament to amend the Indian constitution. The entire debate was, what is the power of the parliament? To what extent can they take away the fundamental rights of the citizens? What are the limitations to it? Parliament, is it really supreme, or it is the Supreme Court of India that is really supreme? Changes were brought into Constitution, Article 24, 25. There were various other provisions of the Indian Constitution that were touched upon. It's a fascinating history of the conflict between the executive and judiciary like never seen before. Now, when that entire debate was happening, there was this case that came before the Supreme Court via an appeal. A 13-judge bench was set up, and through a wafer-thin majority of 7-6, the Supreme Court said that the final arbiter of the Indian Constitution is the Supreme Court of India. Secondly, Parliament can make changes to fundamental rights. They can bring in constitutional amendments, but the basic structure is sacrosanct. One would ask, what is the basic structure? Federalism, equality, liberty, secularism, equality between genders, all these are basic tenets of Indian Constitution. Kesav Nanda Bharti talks about these basic tenets. The most fascinating aspect about these so-called basic tenets is that they remain defined and undefined. They are structured and amorphous at the same time. Because this is clearly something that goes to the heart and definition of democracy. For example, federalism is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. What is the criticism of Kesav Nanda Bharti, and why is it that somebody like Mr. Ranjan Gogoi, who has been the former Chief Justice of India and in fact cited Kesav Nanda Bharti in various judgments that he handed over, criticizes this judgment? One of the key arguments against Kesav Nanda Bharti has been that this entire basic structure doctrine has been churned out of thin air. It has no basis in Indian constitution. The longest constitution of the entire world, written constitution of the entire world, does not talk about the basic structure doctrine. And the fact that the Supreme Court interpreted the constitution in this way and gave itself the supreme power is something that should be questioned. That's what at least most politicians will argue, because this clearly tilts the balance in favor of the executive and not the judiciary. The Supreme Court today is the final arbiter of the Indian Constitution. Now, one imagines a scenario that what it would be like if case of Nanda Bharti did not exist. One wonders, and a question must come to our mind, that what would a scenario really be if case of Nanda Bharti did not exist? I want to remind you all of the dark days of emergency. The fact that Indian jurisprudence is on the right side is because of case of Nanda Bharti. Had it not been for case of Nanda Bharti, and various commentators like Nani Palkhiwala and various other constitutional commentators who have written on the subject would argue that we would be autocracy if the final power did not rest with the judiciary. This is a view that has existed. The fact that there is a check on the power of the parliament has been put by case of Nanda Bharti. But for the times to come, this debate will go on. That is the basic structure doctrine really sacrosanct? Is it really the holy grail? And to what extent should it be protected? Each time you would have a strong government like today with a strong majority on the floor of the House, the basic structure doctrine would be questioned.